Hello and welcome everyone to Redwood's Women in Logistics event. My name is Emily Weiser and I am so grateful to be here hosting for the fourth annual conversation. Very thankful to Redwood for just kind of extending this conversation, allowing us to have this platform once again, and really getting the message out. We really feel it's important to not let it slide, right? Continue to have the conversation year after year. So very thankful for that. Great group of women joining us today, all so much insight, so much experience, and so much to add to the conversation. Also partnering with a local charity here in Chicago, Girls Inc. And they really focus on inspiring young women, reminding them to be smart, be bold, take chances, and really be resilient. And that's what the conversation is all about today, resiliency. And I think that's an important, relevant message to talk about today because we as women, both internally and externally, spend so much time, overcoming hurdles and really bouncing back from difficulties in our lives. So I think you're going to hear a great message today, and I'm really looking forward to what these women have to say. We're going to start off with a fireside chat between Marissa Campisi, who is the general partner at Rucker Park Capital. She has graciously offered her time a second year in a row, so thank you for that. And the former VP of Transportation at Home Depot, Michelle Livingston. I've had some, one-on-one time with these ladies as we were prepping for this conversation, and they just have so much to offer. So very excited, and thank you ladies so much. Take it from here.
Before we're so happy to have you here today, Michelle, to inspire us. My quick background is I have spent the past decade full life cycle investing on the tech side of things. I'm spending a lot of time these days in supply chain and logistics and automation. And I also serve on the board of Redwood Logistics, and I try to help. They are very forward tech thinkers, as you know, and I try to help in that capacity on the board. And I'm really excited to be here today, and that Mark set this up and the Redwood team set this up. And so let's get started. Let's get started if you're ready for that.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think it would be helpful maybe just to start from the very beginning for the audience. Maybe you could just give an overview of how you got into logistics to begin with, the start of your career.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. So I am a graduate of Indiana University, and I was a business major with a concentration in transportation. So I'm actually one of the people who have decided what they wanted to do early, went into the industry, and have loved it every day. And one of the reasons why I chose to get into transportation was because of my dad. He was in the transportation industry. He worked for both truckload and LTL carriers for all my life and most of his. And I will tell you, it is amazing how much you pick up at the kitchen table. So never underestimate your dinner conversations with your kids, even though they may be rolling their eyes and not looking like they're paying attention. Your stories about your day really can have an impact. Because when I got to IU, my first thought was, gee, I'll be an accounting major. Oh no, I'll be marketing. I went down all the traditional routes. And at the time, the transportation program only had 33 students in it and 6 women. Wow. And so I thought, wow, I know something about transportation. I've been hearing about trucks all along. So it seemed like a great opportunity. And at that point in time, there was a real emphasis, like today, to continue to attract women into the industry. So I would say transportation's been a great career move for me, and I've enjoyed it. But like I said, never underestimate those dinner time conversations with your kids. You very well might inspire them to come into the supply chain.
Was your dad happy when you decided this was going to be your life's work?
He was happy, but he had one piece of advice, which I have followed. So his advice to me was always be on the shipper side. Sorry, Redwood Logistics, because it's much more fun to be the customer. And I took that to heart, and I have been fortunate to have worked for a number of great companies, but always on the shipper side.
Yeah, great. So, okay, so 33 students, 6 women. That's very interesting. I imagine there's, or at least you've seen, incredible transition since you started in the business. And can you talk a little bit about that? How much the industry has changed over the course of your career, and what, if you have some thoughts on are there a lot more women in the space today than when you started?
Yeah, you know what? It's been great to see the improvement. A couple of things that I've noticed from the time I first started to now is that certainly the industry has become much more professional. I mean, there are folks out there who are intentionally in there. A lot of folks in transportation kind of fell into it in many ways, and their heart wasn't necessarily in it to win it. But now there certainly are many people who find it a great profession and have worked and studied hard in it. So I think that's one of the big pluses. And the other thing that's really improved is the quality of data and the whole data analytics piece and what you can do with that component. And it certainly has helped the transportation industry tremendously, I think. And particularly from a shipper side, I've always said, with better data, you can make better decisions faster. And we used to have to rely primarily on the carriers. They were, at the time, had made a bigger investment than many companies had on the shipper side. But now you'll see that most companies, I think, have recognized the value of data analytics and what that can do. So it's been great. And the other thing I think I've come to appreciate and recognize is that supply chain is truly a microcosm of industry overall. So there's supply chain HR, supply chain finance, supply chain, you find accounting, like supply chain, everything. And so part of, I think, our challenge as industry is to make sure that folks are aware that supply chain is a great place to grow your career. And certainly, for better or worse, supply chain is getting a lot of play right now, a lot of visibility within every company. I think almost every earnings call has a comment about what's happening in a company's supply chain. And it's truly a great place to continue to grow your career. And it's particularly, I think, great for women. We have made progress. We still have a lot more progress to make in that regard. But for many, many years, I was the only female in the room, and that's just the way it was. I didn't even really think about it. So now it's great not to be the only female in the room, and I think all the concerted effort that the folks like Redwood Logistics and the CSCMP offers a Women and Leader Forum, and almost every major organization has recognized the need to help women continue to grow and develop in their career, and that spotlight is helping make a difference in the number of women who are choosing to go into supply chain and transportation specifically. So we just need to continue to foster that, because certainly a diverse team is the best way to win.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting, your point around harnessing data and making decisions with data, and then sort of the fragmentation, how it's used across the supply chain. Are there certain pockets, just curious, that are earlier than others that you think maybe there's a little, if I was to enter the industry today, there may be more pockets of opportunity or things that could be really interesting that people should think about?
Well, I think, frankly, I find it all very interesting, but I think for the most part, people, when they think about supply chain, they're thinking of something very physical. I need to put a box on a truck. I need to, physically, do something. And, that's not necessarily appealing, but with the fact that we've become so much more technically advanced and so many decisions can be made with the use of technology and better data, I think it really does lend itself to many more applications than what was previously available. And it isn't just a physical movement of goods. It's also the movement of data through the supply chain is equally important.
Very cool. So switching gears a bit, you've been at some incredibly impressive brands. And as you think about your career, I'd be curious, where I sit, it's a lot about the teams and the people and how that the culture that's set early on, and whether or not a company succeeds. I think that's a really big input. And I'm just curious what you've seen, the differences, best practices, things to do, things not to do over the course of your career.
Yeah, I have been blessed with having some great career opportunities in every company I've worked for, which isn't a vast amount. I mean, it's a handful, but I've learned something. And you're right about the corporate culture. I spent the bulk of my time at Kraft Foods, and I lived through the Kraft General Foods, Oscar Mayer, and Nabisco merger and acquisition. And that was a really interesting time period as you're trying to bring diverse cultures together and how to make that work. And it was a fantastic learning experience, to be honest with you. It really was, living through that and trying to help the team get where they needed to go. So that was terrific. And then I was recruited to JCPenney. And at the time, JCPenney was struggling, and it was a really interesting time period to leave. But I had been at Kraft for 17 years. And then walking in new as a vice president to JCPenney, where they have very long tenured associates at the time and very few people from the outside, it was a really bit of a wake-up call for me. I think I had underestimated the value of an informal network, where you have, 17 years, you build up your allies and your network, and you just take a lot of things for granted. And when you walk in new to a company that is particularly as full of tenured associates, you really have to work hard to build their trust. And that was something that I really came to appreciate, that I really had to earn that comfort level from them for them to share information, and they will have forgotten more than I would have ever known, in some of those cases. So it was certainly a learning experience for me, and you have to work really hard to create your network quickly. But you also have to appreciate where they've come from too. And I think that's the one thing that I've always tried to take into consideration. You have to appreciate how the company got to where they are before you start saying, oh, let's move this way. Well, if you don't really understand the background, it's really hard to get people to go with you on a new path. So taking that time to understand that. I asked a lot of, help me understand, help me understand. How did we get there? Why are we doing it this way? Have you ever thought about this? And, you just have to give people an opportunity to chat. So that was great. And then I went to C&S Wholesale Grocers. They were a privately held company, and I believe they still rank in the top 10 privately held companies in the country. And that was totally different experience from Kraft and JCPenney. That was, they were both 100-year-plus companies and very different. C&S was a much younger company, privately held. And that I learned probably more in 2 years there than I did in the previous 10. But when Home Depot called, I came a running. Home Depot was truly a great experience, and probably the best match in cultural and my personal values. And that's the one thing that I didn't always appreciate until you get that perfect match and you're like, oh, yes, this is where I need to be. This is great. Awesome. So I really came to appreciate the culture component. And frankly, before I was really more about the money. But there comes a point in time when you say, no, it isn't just about the money. There needs to be a great culture fit too.
Right. It's really interesting. I did all my school shopping in grade school at JCPenney, and it's really interesting. Your experience at Kraft is very relevant. I think if you think about today, companies are more acquisitive, sometimes for technology, sometimes for different capabilities, and there's often lots of factions of interest or different groups that you have to learn, or companies are also just scaling faster than ever, right? And in some ways, because of technology and some of the data access that you talked about earlier, it's really interesting advice for people getting started today about, like, how do you think about cultivating a trust network in a rapidly evolving environment with different people every day and teams. And I think it's challenging. It is.
And I would say that what you really need to strive for is a sense of belonging. Everybody wants to belong, and you have to almost just come up with that heart, what's in people's heart, what makes them feel like they want to belong to this team that you're trying to create, even if they have come in with very different perspectives and thoughts. But how can you create a new environment for them that one that they want to belong to?
Well, it's really interesting on that point, because then you've done remarkably well being maybe one of the few in an industry that, I mean, it's very hard to feel like you belong when there's not a lot of people that are necessarily have share your same background, or whatever it is, schooling, interests, passions. And it seems like you've done really, really well with that. Any specific tips for someone who maybe is just trying to figure it out? You know, I know I like the space. I don't understand belonging necessarily because I'm very different, or my background's different from everybody that is on my team. Any tips that you can, or stories? Stories would be great if you have stories. If you can think to a story where you felt completely out of place, but you got past it and the result was great. It'd be great to share that with the group.
Yeah, you know, the good news is I have, for the most part, felt like I belonged. And as a leader, I've always tried to focus on creating an environment where others feel like they belong. But I would say, you know, I just to harken back to my situation at JCPenney, where coming in from the outside, and having to build that belonging, it was a challenge. It really took one-on-one connections with people. And I think that I connected well with my team and below. I think it was harder for me at that time to feel like I belonged at that leadership level with my peers and above. And it took a lot more effort. And it was, I'm not sure. I mean, I stayed there I was 17 years at Kraft. I was 4 years at JCPenney, because I don't know that I ever really achieved that belonging that I was looking for. And one of my key takeaways from that time period is I hired in under one regime. And over a relatively short period of time, everyone that I had hired in under basically had moved on outside the company, no longer there. And one of the reasons that I left was because I woke up one morning and said, you know what, I don't know that I have any sponsors here, real sponsors. You know, there's a big difference between sponsorship and mentorship. And, you know, the sponsor is the one who will take care of you and will represent you well when you're not in the room. And I think people liked me well enough. I think they respected me fine, but I don't know that anyone would have really gone to bat for me if there was some big, you know, conversation taking place. And frankly, that was one of the reasons why I chose to move on, because I wasn't sure that I did have that sponsorship. And, you know, it makes a difference. It does make a difference. So I guess I can tell you the story when I felt like I didn't belong. But to go forward, certainly at Home Depot is probably where I have felt like I could really bring my whole self to work. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, we focus on now, is if you can get your team feeling like they can bring their whole self and they can be themselves each and every day, and they don't have to, you know, flip a switch when they walk in the door or go on a Teams call, then I think you've got yourself an environment where people feel like they belong.
Yeah, I love that. It's very interesting, your point about sponsors and how you think about that a little differently. And I was sort of thinking back, someone gave me advice I haven't thought about actually in a long time, which was to build a personal board of directors, kind of like outside the company, wherever you're working, that you can go to and get really more mentorship. But I think in a way, sponsorship when you're kind of in the weeds and not thinking very clearly. And someone, so not standing up for you when you're not in the room, but kind of when you're in the room, but you're not fully present in the room because maybe you're not thinking about things clearly. And I thought that was really great advice. And I tried to do that. And I've had people in my life that have helped me from one seat to the next. Like, no, remember when you were there, you felt this was a little challenging, because we forget these things. Have you developed that kind of mentorship, sponsorship, if that's the right phrasing, outside your companies? Have you found that in women and men? And I would love, if you don't mind, if you could share that.
Yes, I'm very fortunate that I have a strong network that I can rely on, and it's hard to ask for help sometimes. I mean, particularly, when you think you need to have all the answers, but the ability to to have a conversation and say, you know, I really, really don't know, you know, why this happened. I don't know what I should do next. You know, I've got this personal situation with this one leader. I'm not quite sure how to go. And to be able to tap into various folks for their expertise that are basically in the industry as well, because I think some of it, I don't know that's necessarily unique to our industry, but it certainly sometimes feels like it is. But to have that is great. And but it takes time, you know, and you have to be selective on when you go, and you cannot, you know, it's just like the rules on network. Yeah, you can't wait till you need it to touch base and try and tap in on that. You have to be willing to give back. You know, you never, it never can be a one-sided conversation. You have to be willing to give up, to give back as well.
I think that's a really good point for people who are thinking about managing their own career. If you don't have those relationships, how do you build them? And it's not a one-way street, like, hey, this is who I am, I need help, I need help. I think the point, at least it sounds like you're making, is there has to be some value that you're really giving back to those people so that they're going to become champions and mentors over the course of your career.
Yeah, and I think it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I mean, you have to be true to your word. If you say that you can help someone, then you really have to put forth that effort to make that happen. You know, do what you say you're going to do, and things certainly go better. But and it's important. You mentioned about the internal kind of board of directors and the external board of directors. I have folks who have nothing to do with my industry that are just you know, great at what they do, and it's wonderful to get a totally different perspective as well. And it's really, you know, they're all in business, so that's helpful. But otherwise, you know, to change the names, protect the innocent, they, you know, I could have a whole conversation. They probably wouldn't really know what I was talking about, but they understand the dynamics in relationships and can provide a lot of insight on that.
How did you build those relationships? Just peers that scaled, or?
You know, the way that I did it is I'm involved with a number of organizations. So for me, the couple that come to mind is the Network of Executive Women. I was involved with them in Atlanta for 10 years. And so through there, you know, they're all women in all different types of industries. And, you know, you find you've got something clicking with folks, and you just continue to make that work. It's time consuming. I mean, you have to make an effort to build your network, but that's been really helpful. AWESOME, which stands for Achieving Women's Excellence in Supply Chain Operations Management and Education, has also been a great organization. And it's amazing how many times you'll say awesome in a really short period of time. But that's a really great networking arena as well. And then also within Home Depot, and I think other companies do the same, there were internal associate resource groups like Women's Link, and that was open to all women in the corporate headquarters. And then Velvet Hammers, which was an organization that Carol Tomei, our chief financial officer at the time, had created over 15 years ago to help female directors and above. And what those organizations, although internally like, oh, that's easy breezy, but I met people that I would have nothing in common with on a day-to-day, like literally, but to suddenly meet with someone in compensation or in benefits or in, you know, some other part of the company that really doesn't interact with our group at all. It was a really great way to build some great relationships and get their insight as well. So you have to put forth the effort, but normally the effort is well worth it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious if I'm a student of history, so I read a bit, and I may have talked about this last year, so I can't remember, but are there any women throughout history in any brand of leadership, like companies, politics, that that you admire, or that like, as an example, I think on the last panel, I talked a little bit about Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm sure I talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, and I'm sure I talked about, or Katharine Graham, as my two women that I just think have done unbelievable things. And really, in the case of Eleanor Roosevelt, was the other president who presided over 1940s America. And in the case of Katharine Graham, I think she outperformed her peers. She was the first to do it in the S&P. She stepped into a role that she had never worked before. Her husband just committed suicide. She just ran a company from scratch. And I just find them to be remarkable women that we should talk about more. And I don't usually talk about them except for events like this, but curious if you have anyone that, inspired you that, maybe we can, and the audience can look into and perhaps grab some inspiration as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it is wonderful that you continue to highlight women in history that have made tremendous impact. And there are many that I go to. Margaret Thatcher was one. I thought that she was really interesting and certainly well above ahead of her time and what she was able to accomplish. And I think there are, I guess what I like the public ones, but I would say there are just as many that have never hit the big times that are personal inspirations as well. And those are equally inspiring to me to say, just because when you think of what some of the women have accomplished so much with so many hurdles, and you're like, wow, that is impressive. I thought I had a bad day. It's like, no, I had a really easy day. And I think, we can, if we just take a moment to understand people's personal stories and what challenges that they've overcome, that can be equally inspiring.
Well, that's you. I mean, you were a student of 6 and entering an industry. I mean, and have really been an illustration for a lot of people to say this is what's possible. If do you hear that a lot from people?
Oh, I appreciate that. But I mean, it was very somewhat planned on my part, to be honest with you. I decided I could leverage the fact that I was, one of a few females and that I could be differentiated from others because there are not that many women in the room. And it took many years, and I'm not particularly proud of this moment, but for many years, I did not necessarily, work that hard to help bring other women to the table. I mean, if you ask me personally, would I help you? Like, of course I will. But I did very little to really encourage more of that, because in many ways, I kind of felt like I had it figured out. It's like, it took me a minute. I've been successful. I kept climbing up the ranks and I kind of figured it out. And I really wasn't overly concerned about it. I'm comfortable in meetings and you get used to being the only female and it's not that big a deal. It was really great to have no lines going into the restroom, of course, at different events. But I'll tell you what changed my mind and why I do what I do now. So there is a book that Gail Evans wrote. You may recognize Gail Evans. She was the first EVP at CNN, and she was also a professor at Georgia Tech. And she was coming to Home Depot to speak to our women in supply chain group. And so she's got a couple books out, and one of her books says, "She Wins, You Win." And I will remember the day forever, because I was on a flight coming back from visiting one of our distribution centers and I'm preparing for it. So I'm reading through, and basically I turned the page and she's like, "If you think you've made it to the top and you've worked really hard to get there and all that," I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. I've worked. Absolutely. I've done that. Absolutely." And then you turn the page and she said, "But if you haven't really, grabbed the hand of another female and helped her up the rank, then you haven't done your job." And I mean, I remember sitting there on the plane stunned. It's like, wow, I have not done what I should do. And as you think about the number of years left, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to really step it up. And that's really what has inspired me to start Women in Supply Chain for Home Depot and be involved in these other organizations, because I have a lot of years to make up where I need to be much more helpful and influential for other women. And so it was quite the wake-up call for me. And I'm always appreciative of Gail's, having such an impact, because I mean, I really vowed to make a change at that point in time to do better.
I think I had a similar experience. I was at an event. I think I was a VP at the time, so I hadn't made general partner. And similarly, Tina Fey was speaking, and she said, never be comfortable being the only woman in the room. Always pull another woman up. And I wasn't, I remember thinking, am I in a position to pull anybody up? Probably not. But also I'm really comfortable being the only woman in the room. And my industry at the time, it was really, the numbers were very low single digits of women on the check writing side. And I thought about that. It's more fun. It's more fun when there's more women in the room, actually. That's what I've learned. But I think you're very humble because, and I think it's wonderful that you're doing this and you're doing all the things that you're doing. You also move the dial forward for women by being an example, which I think I would feel uncomfortable not highlighting.
Well, I think as women, we have to continue to support one another. Certainly, we've made strides over the last decade for sure, and hopefully we'll continue to do some. But we know you really need 3 people at the table, right? I mean, that's 3 women to truly make a difference. And, I think as we continue to improve women on boards, that's going to help improve. I think we need to hold ourselves more accountable for 2 things. One, and I'll just talk to the shippers. I think as a shippers, we need to encourage our carrier community to make sure that they are hiring a diverse team and that they have a diverse board if they're if they're not family owned, and we need to set that expectation that's what our expectation is. I don't need to any longer sit down in a room with a group of carriers that are all look like themselves and no one looks like me. Yeah. So I think we have to hold ourselves accountable to really help move things forward. We have to work really hard to make this industry one that we can continue to attract and retain the very best talent. And in that case is oftentimes women. But if you have a choice between supply chain's hard, transportation's hard. If you can go do something else or supply chain, we have to make it an industry where people want to be. And over the years, at times I've let things be said or that I should have stopped. And I didn't, thinking I was taking the high road. Well, you know what? As an industry, we have to call out. I don't think anyone intentionally means to say the wrong thing, but you get a couple of folks that make comments or whatever, and I don't have to put up with that, and like, why do I do that? So I think those of us that are leaders in the industry really need to use our voice to just help others make sure that we are creating an environment that is comfortable for all.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, and sometimes it's hard, right? You're intimidated when you're young, and you're intimidated that if you say something, it could be alienating, it costs your job. And I feel like that support system and people being more inclusive and vocal and of all races is really, we're moving in the right direction, and we need to do more. I think it's just harder. I've had similar moments that I should have said something. I should have pulled someone aside, but didn't. But you learn that as you get older.
Yes, that's one of the benefits of being a woman of a certain age. It's like, let me help you. Help me help you.
And I think that your book, I'm reading Dostoevsky, so I'm feeling like I might need to switch to something a bit lighter and more inspiring. It's a very dark book that I'm reading. I think people recording and sharing their stories and doing things like this is also really helpful. So the internet gives us a great opportunity to go find content, right? That sort of like, what are the best practices? I love what you shared today around building trust networks. I think that's really important, not necessarily easy to do, but seeing it as a two-way street. Mentors, looking around, making sure you have sponsors within the company, potentially an external board of directors, feeling like a good cultural fit is really important. And then what are we going to do to give back? Those were the sort of the things that I really learned and appreciate you sharing today. Are there anything else you want to share just broadly about the innovation that's going on in the space? Anyone that stands out as like they seem to be doing really cool things, or trends that you like that you're paying attention to? This is the venture capitalist asking.
Yeah, thanks for qualifying that. So certainly there's a lot of great things. I always say, for those of us who grew up in the Jetson era, the whole automation is tremendous. The fact that you can have a truck drive from El Paso, Texas to Phoenix and maybe never be touched by a driver's hands is really exciting. And I know that does create some concern for the professional truck drivers, but I think there's always going to be a need for them, and to be able to attract more to the industry because they're home more frequently and have a better balance of life, because automation can take care of that longer haul is a tremendous thing. So I really love all of the AI and all of that. I just find it fascinating, and I think it's going to make a huge difference in the industry going forward. So I'm all about the automation of whatever can be automated to allow folks to do jobs that are truly more meaningful and powerful.
Yeah, awesome. I'm trying to learn a bit about climate as it overlaps with supply chain and logistics. So I'm early in my studies, but I'm finding it an early industry and sort of how we think about it. So I think it's really interesting, and I hope to spend a bit more time there. Well, I would love to. Is there anything that you want to share with the group that maybe I didn't ask, or things that maybe, not to bring it to a what shouldn't we do, but things you might have learned the hard way in your career that we can benefit from your wisdom and experience?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. The good news is I have a phenomenal ability to block out bad things. So it's a real gift, let me tell you. It enables me to have a happy outlook on life each and every day. But there are a couple things that I have learned. And I think one of those is that you have to be willing to take risks. I know a lot of people talk about that. And in my world, what that translated to is I relocated for a number of jobs, and I was very fortunate that my husband was very supportive of that. And my daughter, at the time may not have appreciated it, but now that she's grown, she looks back and realizes she has friends in a number of places. But those are big risks. And fortunately, it worked out because I had a very supportive family. But I would say, if you get that opportunity, you have to be willing to jump out and give it a whirl. So that would be probably the biggest thing. And, the other stuff we talk about all the time in different industries, that, if you're applying for a job and there are 10 criteria, you don't have to have all 10, that, you just have to be directionally correct and go for it. So, and you have to believe in yourself, and you have to want to do it. And I think if you make that commitment, then you'll be successful.
So take risks, jump in without having necessarily all the answers or the full checklist, and maybe refining it as you go. I think that's really, really good advice. I love your sponsors. My takeaway is when you're in a company and you look around and you think about sponsorship, if you don't have it, can you create it? Or do you have to potentially make a change?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and can I just add on to that? Because I think this is one of the things I've learned. I've actually had sponsors at places that I didn't even know that I had until I was leaving. So that was kind of an interesting situation. So you can have an impact and not even necessarily realize who is speaking on your behalf in different meetings. And the other thing I learned, and I haven't done this myself, but I was at an event and one of the women said she sought out her sponsor. And she went to the person that she thought would represent her well and said, I would really appreciate you serving as my sponsor, not a mentor, but a sponsor. And, here's why I want this. And here's the way I'm looking at it. And the person said, okay. And she updated her sponsor regularly on what she was trying to accomplish, because they were in different parts of the organization, and it worked. And so I have to say, I was surprised, because I would never have thought about actually seeking out a sponsor, but it was a really good opportunity. And at least for her, it was successful. And, maybe you have to knock on a few doors to find someone who's comfortable enough saying yes. And then you have to work on that sponsorship. You can't leave them high and dry. They can't represent you if they don't know anything about you.
So the lesson is to be proactive in sponsorship. And if someone closes the door on you, I guess you just sort of, your earlier lesson, which is to compartmentalize and not remember. I think about that too, and I have read some great literature and have had experiences. It's harder in practice, I think. I've learned, because you remember these things, you don't want to repeat them, but it is really the right advice, right? Like, you can't, what are you going to do once time has passed? So you got to keep looking forward. Well, this has been tremendous. I've learned so much. I build trust networks internally and externally, sponsorship, being proactive about sponsorship, and collaboration, as opposed to seeing things as competition always. I mean, the idea is an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity one. And I think it goes without saying, being an example, right? Because sometimes I think it's getting better, but sometimes there may not be one. You're going to be the first. And I think you've done that in many ways, Michelle. And so we're thankful that you're very humble about it, but that's exactly what you've done. And your advice is really helpful. I didn't know a lot of it when I started, and the internet, I mean, this kind of content wasn't readily available. So I feel that we're a bit more fortunate today that we can have access to really smart, inspiring, experienced, successful women that say, hey, there's a different way, or this is the way that I took. This is the way maybe we shouldn't this is the path we shouldn't have gone down. So I learned so much today. I love the book recommendation. I like the help, having that self-reflection, or I suppose we all just went through a period of introspection and saying, hey, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to give back? And I think we can all do better. I know I can. So thank you very much.
Wow, ladies, that was amazing. So insightful. I appreciate you guys being so candid and just the perspective that you guys bring to the table. Your experience has obviously led you to where you are today. And I think that's, we can all feel that impact. A few things that I specifically took away from the conversation, I think first and foremost, is that it's way more fun to be a customer. So thank you, Michelle, for that. But, I love the point that you made about making the workplace a place to belong, where people really want to be. So when we think about trying to recruit women and bring women into the industry, that's exactly it. They want to be part of the team. They want to feel like they're making an impact and, really feeling the inclusivity. So I love that. I love the idea of grabbing, a fellow woman's hand and bringing her into the room. So that was really great. But last but not least, the part that I really enjoyed was the having some humor, having some, lightness in the room. And I think that's so important too, because we all find ourselves in these situations where it just feels stiff, or it just is, an uncomfortable feeling. So I love the idea of trying to, make a few laughs here and there. So thank you, ladies. That was fabulous. So now we're going to transition to the panel discussion. And, this group of ladies also I've had some time with. We were doing a lot of kind of, prepping as a group and just kind of putting a cohesive message together. And the way that they think about things and like the big picture, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So this one's going to be led by Christina Ryan, who is a fellow Redwood Logistics member. And she, she probably would not mention this herself or would not boast about herself, but she just won a Women in Supply Chain Award from Supply and Demand Chain Executives. So very exciting. And I'm very excited for her to be recognized. And I really look forward to seeing what she has to say and what insight she brings into this conversation as well. So there you go, ladies.
I'm going to do a quick intro and around the group here, and then we'll get started. So Christina with Redwood Logistics, I'm the Executive Vice President of our Managed Services Group. I've been in the industry for about 15 years, and I'm really excited to help participate in today's event because women in logistics is a very strong passion of mine, and I'm excited to see other women in the industry grow and develop and continue to present ourselves out to the community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anne next.
Hi, I am Anne Ranke. Thank you for having me. Redwood Logistics is a fabulous partner for our association, which is the Transportation Intermediaries Association. We represent all aspects of the third-party logistics industry. I have been there almost 1 year. My 1-year anniversary will be in a few weeks. Prior to that, I've been in the transportation industry for over 20 years. I worked for 16 of those years at CSX, a railroad. A year and a half, I was in public service at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and then started here at TIA for last October. So thanks for having me. I'm excited about our panel today.
How about Madhuri? You want to go next?
Sure. I'm Madhuri Rao. I am Vice President of Business Strategy, Finance, Analytics, and Logistics for a company in the entertainment industry. It's PRG. I've been dabbling in the industry for the past 5 years, I should say, and it's really important for women's voices to be heard. And I feel honored to be part of this group of women, making the connection, making our voice heard, and helping any way I can, building future leaders in the industry. Thank you.
Great. And last but not least, Megan, you want to give us a quick intro?
Thanks, Christina. I just want to say hello to everyone. Thank you for everyone who's joined this event today. I'm super excited to be a part of it. Megan Fortenberry, I'm the Director of Technology and Continuous Improvement at RWI Logistics. I've been in the supply chain logistics industry for 21 years and have held a wide variety of supply chain positions, and very excited to be part of this event. I think that as I reflect over my career and my own personal and career development, these types of events have been so important in shaping who I've become as a leader. I feel that each one of these events, I am able to network and establish additional relationships with women in the industry. And I'm always able to find one piece of information that I take back that really helps me to focus on my development and making improvements. So I'm hopeful that I can provide that to each one of you who's attending this event today.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a list of questions for the panel today that we'll go through and give you all a little bit of intake and background from our perspectives on the questions. And so the first one here is, many leaders are recognized for their unique leadership styles. What leadership style do you embody and why? And so we'll open this up to the whole group. How about we start with Madhuri?
Sure. The leadership styles that I'm most comfortable with, I would say, is collaborative and also a coaching with my team. Collaborative because it takes different perspectives to get a 360-degree view of any given situation, and come up with a solution that works for everyone. So a collaborative leadership style, I find, is very important with the various hats that I wear with the company. And with my team, I take a more mentoring and coaching approach. I have a team that I came to inherit, a wonderful team. And I had to find out what their strengths were to be able to slot them into roles and functions that they would shine in. So those are the styles that I'm most comfortable with.
Great. Anne or Megan, how about you guys?
Sure, I'll go next. So when I started at TIA a year ago, I had been a department head prior to becoming, the head of an organization. And I felt like as a department head, I kind of, I mean, I didn't wing it, but I don't feel like I was as mindful about my leadership style. And mainly because I was promoted above my peers. And it was sort of trying to make them feel still empowered and not feel like I was the dictator in charge and all that kind of thing. So that really was my emphasis there, knowing that they were so helpful to me and that I wasn't going to try to Bigfoot them because they needed to have an important role. When I started at TIA, I read a couple leadership books because I thought, let's just see what's out there in the universe. And I read this book called Humble Leadership, which, to Madry's point, is really all about collaboration and relying on the issue experts that you have on your team, knowing that you're not the hero. You can't possibly save everything, nor should you even try, because it's going to be an exercise in frustration. And so what I have found is having those people on your team feel like they can A, offer suggestions without penalty, B, act on those suggestions, and then feel empowered to talk them through with the team, with their teams, with our board, has been enormously helpful. Because quite frankly, I've been in the transportation industry for a long time, but I had not been in specifically logistics. So how could I possibly know everything I had to know anyway? So I have found this not only a huge relief, because you don't have to do everything and you don't have to have everything depend on you, but also enormously helpful because it's empowering them and developing their own skills, the team's own skills, because it's not all about me. It's all about the team.
Absolutely. I would like to piggyback on, I think my leadership style kind of is similar to both Ann and Madry's, as they've talked about collaboration and listening to a team. I guess if I had to classify my leadership style, I would say I try to be a servant leader. So really approach all situations with empathy and listening, seek to understand before really making an assessment and taking action. And I think this really, why it's important is it helps to foster and encourage diversity of thought. So listening to that group that I'm working with or that individual, it also helps me to figure out what areas I can teach and show, in order to enable that person. It creates a culture of trust. And then, I want to grow the individuals on my team into leaders as well. So really trying to work alongside the team, I think is extremely important in really growing their leadership capabilities.
All really good points. I think I would like to take one from everybody. Those are great. And one thing that I think for me in particular that has been maybe more of a trait or a characteristic and incorporated into my leadership style is communication. I think communication becomes that foundation and that backbone that connects collaboration and how you empower and how you connect others through not only your work, but through your relationships that you're developing, whether that is in business or personally. So the more we can be clear, we can be transparent, we can be thoughtful in how we communicate, I think that helps bring it together too. All right, so our next question, leading during COVID-19 with so many uncertainties surrounding us has been a roller coaster, as I'm sure everyone has experienced this past 18 months. Have you all been able to keep your head high and navigate the numerous disruptions and delays within our industry? We'll start with Madry.
Sure. A really good question. Yes, the past 18 months have been challenging, and I think most of us haven't seen any time like this before in our careers. Of course, mine is the shortest span in supply chain versus the rest of the women on this forum, but it's been difficult on so many levels. At first, we had to figure out how to cut very quickly, given the precipitous drop in demand that we saw in our industry. We are in the live events industry, and one day we were on and the next day we went from to zero very, very quickly. And Redwood was a great partner in helping us, and along with some other carrier partners in helping us cut our network to a point where we're able to manage, especially from the economics perspective. So that was a first challenge that we had to go through. And we were able to do that in about 2 to 3 weeks with the help of some great partners. And of course, a great group of people at work. And now we are in a situation where demand is coming back and there is a severe capacity constraint and some massive supply chain disruptions that none of us have seen ever before. And this is posing a different kind of problem where our loads are being dropped at the last minute, very, very last minute. Like last night, we had a load in Miami where we had 2 carriers scheduled. One driver shows up and times out because of ELD mandates, and the other driver never shows up. So now, we have to work, and this all happens at 5 in the evening, where everybody off email and phone lines are no longer being picked up. We have to scramble to find a way, and we are recovering this morning. It's because of a great group of people that work together, from the client to the operations team to the sales team, everybody collaborating and saying, let's roll up our sleeves and figure out how to recover from this. So it is the only way we're able to stay afloat is leaning on our relationships that we've had over the years, including with Redwood and some of the carrier partners we've had, communicating to our customers and telling them, when has FedEx ever not guaranteed something? When has FedEx, worked backwards on its SLAs? When has Amazon never dropped, shipped your stuff on time at 8 p.m. on the day that they guaranteed it? And when have some of the high-end retailers no longer guaranteeing next day delivery, right? It's no longer an option. If you go to some of your favorite retailers, it's no longer an option. So these unprecedented times, the only way we can mitigate the situation is to work collaboratively, lean in on the relationships, have the conversations with starting from the clients to the sales to operations and working together. That's the only way we are able to even manage the situation. And I have concerns for the next few months, to be honest.
Oh, yes. I think we are all still in that uncertainty of concerns over the next few months. Megan, how about what's from your perspective? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that we are facing the same issues. For us, it's really extreme highs, peaks in demand, and lows, right? And we saw our business rapidly change overnight. We had customers where we couldn't service fast enough to get their products on the shelf, and other, food service industry related customers that their demand just fell out overnight with restaurants closing and things like that. And I think we have seen success in approaching it in a very similar manner with teamwork. And we all, work in our functional areas, but we've learned to kind of play different roles and jump in and become, very entrepreneurial and find new ways to approach these types of situations and challenges, and really redefine, how we go out and find new business opportunities. And so, as a result, I've even personally experienced jumping in and working on some projects that maybe typically I would, take a back seat to, or a secondary role, and just finding, those partners across the industry, or also within our own company, to say, hey, let's jump in on this and let's figure it out and let's find a way to do it. I think we're all facing really challenging times with labor shortages. So there's opportunities out there, but then to be able to deliver on those opportunities with labor shortages, and then relative to the industry and job opportunities, right? Very easy for people to make changes and leave companies. So it's been a challenge, but I think that we've most succeeded when we've banded together and created an environment where we're working as a team. And then again, to echo Madry's point, communicating to our customers, setting expectations of where we have strengths and we can deliver, and when we can't, being proactive and open and direct on those things as well.
Awesome. And I think that kind of leads in right to our next question. So throughout our careers as women in logistics, I think it's safe to say we've all had our moments of self-doubt at some point or uncertainty. But I think it's important that we focus on how we overcome those moments and fears in our life. So would any of you like to share how you pushed past those uncertainties or fears or moments where you really doubted what you were doing or where you were going? Why don't we start with Anne?
Sure. So I wish I could tell you that I never had self-doubt. Wouldn't that be awesome? But it is not true. Here's a way to explain it that makes sense to me. When I left CSX, I left there after 16 years, and I left with a couple of things in the hopper, but nothing yet defined. And I was thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Am I going to be like, I have 2 children. Are we going to be starving? Are we going to eat cabbage leaves? You know what I mean? You're just going through all these fears. Like, how can I make it? And, I got a job 3 weeks later. It was fine. But at the time, obviously, you're thinking through all these terrible thoughts, like I'm a fraud. I can't get anything right. And what I came to find out is the reason I got the job afterwards at USDOT was that I had established a reputation for myself as a woman of her word, an honest broker, someone that you could rely on, that was going to be competent, and not because, people did things for me. This is stuff that I achieved on my own. It's so critical if you're going to be, whatever your role is in life, that you really focus on, all right, how am I going to make sure that I am known? How are people going to know me? What do I want it to stand for? And people liked working with me because they knew that if they called me up and I would, they'd say, well, we like this bill, but who's against it? I would tell them. Or, what is CSX doing about this? They're doing something different. I would tell them whatever it was. I was honest about it. I was responsive, and I would get back to them. And that carried forward to the next job. So I guess my point is, when you're overcome with self-doubt, it's good to remember that you're putting stuff out there that will pay dividends. And you may not even know it at the time, but ultimately that's what paid off for me, was the fact that I had tried so hard to be responsive and work towards having a good reputation in my town, which is DC, which is a smaller town than you might think.
Very nice point. Megan, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really been about getting outside of my comfort zone and taking on some roles throughout my career that weren't necessarily that traditional supply chain logistics career path. And for instance, I took a role as the safety manager for a production facility of 500 people. To me, that role, I don't know that I do know I never had that role, in my plan on my next, 3 to 5 year plan. But someone, in the organization approached me and said, hey, have you considered this role? And I said, well, no, not really. I don't know how I would be, really certified or be a top candidate for this role. And so it was really encouraging to get outside of my comfort zone and take on a role that I hadn't necessarily had a vision for my career path, but it helped to open my mind to say, if you have the right will, you have the right characteristics, and you have the right resources surrounding you, you can succeed. And I think that's so important. You don't have to be 100% ready for a role. You don't have to know exactly, like Anne said, exactly what that next role is going to be. You have to be open to opportunities, and you have to make sure that it's a fit relative to your skills and your abilities. But you might not really need to check every single one of those boxes. And I think being able to take a variety of roles has really enabled me to have the confidence to be able to overcome barriers or obstacles and look at new opportunities that I otherwise probably wouldn't have looked at.
That is so well said, Megan. Thank you so much. I think that just to piggyback off one point there, I think as women, we tend to be a little bit more self-critical or self-aware of our faults sometimes. And saying yes and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable can be very challenging and difficult, right? So by doing that, not only does it help build your confidence, but it helps build your skill set to be well diverse and well-rounded so that you can exceed in whatever role is out there. And I think through my past, I've seen that happen both at Redwood and previous companies. So absolutely embodying that, I think you hit it nail on the head. That's fantastic. Okay, so our next question here is, how did you navigate power struggles early in your career versus later when you had more formal leadership roles? Anne, how about we start with you again?
Well, so you never know how other people are being perceived, right? And so if you have, let's say you're sort of in a struggle with a colleague, you feel like, well, do I need to say something? Is this clear? And what I have found is that if something is resonating to you, by and large, it's also resonating to other people. So I have tried never to be a person who says, this, colleague Joe is a real pain in my rear. And let me tell you why. Because first of all, no one wants to be the complainer. And second of all, you typically can get it figured out. It doesn't work to sort of, appeal to a higher authority and say, I'm gonna get this. This guy's dumb. It just doesn't work. So to the extent you can negotiate these things without appealing to a higher authority, I think it's really to your benefit, to the extent you can, to the extent it's not something that sort of is illegal or whatever. I don't know, whatever, something's right. But as you get older, then people are coming to you with issues. And what I have found is I would rather people come to me with issues where they have a solution. Back to my earlier point, I never wanted to be a complainer. And if I were a complainer, I didn't feel like it would be helpful. So now as I see people who sometimes do that, I always want them to come up with a solution. If they have a personal issue with somebody on the team, I want them to figure out, all right, what can we do about it? Do we need to have some sort of counseling session between you two? What is it that could help? Because ultimately, you want to create an environment where people can come to you, but they don't feel like they need to, if that makes sense. And so it's a challenge working with people, obviously, and personalities, but I have found that the more open you can be and receptive into accepting what they're telling you, but also saying, the onus is on you to come up with a solution.
Really good feedback. Madhuri, how about you? Do you have any experiences you can share with the group?
Absolutely, and it's kind of aligned with what Anne just mentioned. Early on in my career, I was fortunate to be part of a leadership development program where one of the speakers came in and said, usually most challenges or differences of opinion can be resolved by exchanging data. Because what he said was during his talk, the reason you have a difference of opinion is you're coming to a different conclusion based on the data that you are processing. And the other person is coming to a different set of conclusions because they have a different set of data that they're processing. That was really a game changer for me in how I approached, any challenges, differences of opinion that I had, after that. The other thing that was very useful early on in my career was having an open mind and having a learning mindset. I was at FedEx when every 6 months I used to be changed to a different role, and I used to wonder, what people were thinking when they were putting me in the different roles. I am a career finance and strategy person. And at first I was doing strategy, and then they put me on a HR cultural change, and I was going, somebody must have gotten this wrong. I'm very comfortable hiding behind numbers, and now you're putting me with no numbers, talking about emotions and feelings and culture, and I'm going, what are these guys thinking? It was a learning experience. I did that for 8 or 9 months, and then they put me on an IT project, which was an enterprise single customer ID. It was all the rage in that time. And I was going, seriously. I sat in a room feeling like, and I have to admit, complete idiot, not knowing anything about IT, the systems we're building, nothing, right? But after the first week, I said, okay, I'm going to learn. So I would be sitting in the room at the table and taking notes, and I didn't ask a single question. I think it probably took me 4, maybe 5 months to ask my first question. And when I asked it, one of the project leads comes out. I get out of the room, nobody answers the question, and he goes, "We're not there yet, Madhuri." And I said, okay, I have arrived on this project. Now I know a little bit of what these guys are talking about. And my time here has been well spent. That has actually stuck with me throughout. And I'll tell you, that is still something that I use. Like I mentioned, I've been dabbling in supply chain and logistics only over the past 5 years. Before that, it was every function in the finance area that you can think of, from FP&A to corporate finance to investment banking. I've done everything, and strategy. So coming into supply chain logistics, I had to be comfortable with being the person in the room who knew nothing. And then having a learning mindset, an open mindset to say, okay, I'm going to learn. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions. There are so many times, even in areas that I actually should know, I've asked a question just because it was the day, the moment, or the previous meeting that I've come from, that in retrospect would be like, what the heck was I thinking? But I asked it, and I was comfortable with asking it. And I was comfortable with everybody thinking, oh my God, she must be out of her mind. But it helped me learn. It really helped me learn. So I would say, ask questions, be open in your mindset, and exchange information to resolve, power struggles. So those are the things that have stood me in good stead.
If I could just add one thing too, we're one thing as a team, you're all on the same team. So yes, you can have different opinions, but at the end of the day, you want what's best for the organization. And that should be an emphasis, sort of like a successful marriage. You're both on the same team. Doesn't, you don't want to win or lose. You're both pulling together. And so that to me is the most successful organizations. Again, you're going to have differences of opinions, but if you're pulling together as a team and remember that that's what's most important, I think that can sort of ease some of the differences.
100%. Those are all great feedback, great advice items for potential young leaders, as well as even folks that have been in the industry for a while. I know sometimes it's hard to take a step back and really look at stuff holistically. So that's good advice that we should all keep in the back of our mind. All right. So our next question is, how can our industry better support not only women and women with growing families, but all of us attempting to achieve a better work-life balance? And I think this especially hits home over the last 12 to 18 months, right? That work-life balance has been a struggle for many people. So Megan, why don't you talk us through your experiences and what advice you would give other women out there?
Yeah, I always say I don't really believe that there is such thing as a work-life balance, because it's never in balance. It's just about work-life management, right? And whether you have children or outside hobbies or friends or family, right? Everyone needs to have the freedom and the ability to feel that they can dedicate time to both sides of that. Work hard, play hard. And I think that you bring up a great point, Christina, in that sometimes there are silver linings in every tough situation. I think the silver lining in the COVID and the pandemic situation is that it taught us that in some instances we kind of have to manage both simultaneously. And I think for us, for our organization and for logistics, traditionally, logistics is not an industry where you work remote, right? People do better when they're in groups together, working side by side. In our industry, it's very fast paced. There's not a lot of time to work over email. I'm sure we all have experienced office environments that are loud and boisterous, and teammates conversing and yelling back and forth to one another. But we had to change overnight, and we had to take our company and enable everyone to work remotely. And I think it taught us a lot. It taught us that if we can build the right level of structure and accountability, that we can still drive results in the remote environment. And as a result of that, I think it's led to opportunities to be a little bit more flexible with work schedules and with accomplishing the tasks for the day. So I think that it's really important to be able to speak up and work with your leader and your team when you need that flexibility to really be able to manage work and life demands and be able to drive accountability. So be very clear. For me, I'm very specific about the boundaries that I try to maintain between my work and my life balance. And I won't say that there aren't times at night where I'm working, but I try to be very specific about my kids' activities and what I'm participating and what I'm actively engaging in. And when I'm actively engaging in those things, I'm talking and giving heads up to my team, to my leadership, and saying, I'm not going to be available for this amount of time, and making sure that there are people in place that can cover, that can move the business forward or deal with any urgent issues. And then I think there's a flip side to that, right? And that I try to give back and help to support others when they need to engage, with personal activities and family demands and things like that. And I think that that has proven to be very successful and very important, because overall you have to be happy in life and be happy in how your work impacts your life.
Absolutely. Madhuri, how about you? From your perspective, what can the industry do better to support women, given our current environment?
I would say offer flexibility to families is something that has always been there, that women needed, but most employers were not able to accommodate or open to accommodating. And I think the pandemic, as you mentioned, Christina, has made it a necessity for us to be able to work, right? And one of the things initially, when 18 months ago, I noticed that now it's okay for kids to run through Zoom calls and stuff like that. Before that, it wasn't. I mean, when I was raising my two girls, I would be mortified. If I was working from home and it happened every so often because I had to make international calls late at night, my office door would be shut, and it was a given that nobody should enter unless there is an emergency, right? And now that flexibility, I think, is something that has always been necessary, but I think the pandemic has forced it to be acceptable in the workplace. So I would say
absolutely correct. Yeah.
I just want to add, I think that is such a good comment and such a good thing that has come out of it, because I also think I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 11-year-old son, but for her, like, she's been able to see so much better what I do and kind of learn. And I think that's great, for our children, that it is acceptable to share a little bit more about, what does mom do every day at work, and helps them to see, what the potential in the future can bring them.
Absolutely. It's almost as if it's humanized our actual lives, right, within the workplace. So it's really been transformational at Redwood as well. I mean, we've gone, I think at the first month of the pandemic, like, can we really do this? Are we okay? Like, is everything going to work? To now, 15, 18 months later, to really see that we can do it, and we can actually have better balance of lives. And to Megan, to your point, I loved it. It's balancing the imbalance, right? So there's always going to be a pull and a take and a give, but where are you needed at what point in time? How do you protect certain aspects of your life to give yourself that freedom, that mental break, the relationships? How do you maintain all of that stuff? So I think it's been fantastic to see Redwood support our employees, women and men, both through that. And I think it's going to be more of the norm through the future, as I think we're seeing that across multiple organizations across the country. All right, so next up, research is showing that leadership pipelines within our industry have strengthened over the past years, improving diversity and inclusion across the board. So would you all agree with that is the question? And we'll start with Anne.
Yeah, I would. I would think, I always tell this story. When I started at CSX in 2003, the line for the women's bathroom at a company meeting was not existent. There was no line. There was 10 of us. That's not exactly true, but you know what I mean. And then by the time I left, it was a long line. There was a lot of women in the ranks and diversity in the ranks, and it was all I would say this, it was a concerted effort of the leadership to make it happen. And you have to have that buy-in and that support from the leadership, from the organization, in order to understand that you need to have diverse voices within the organization. So it's a commitment from the top. And I think, if anything, over the last 18 months, we have seen that we need to do better at that. I think that that's a general conclusion that most have reached. I mean, look, all of the panelists, all of us are here in senior roles, and it's because people said we need to be more committed to getting a good cross-section, a good representation of the voices out there. And I would say in one other thing too, there's also much more resources given to people who are new leaders, and an emphasis on how to make them successful. Because it's one thing to be a very competent and sort of flying star as you go through your career. It's another thing to know how to be a good leader, because when you're a leader, the skills that you use to get to be a leader aren't necessarily going to be the skills that you use as you are a leader. And so not only is there a commitment to bring in diverse voices, but there's a commitment to, all right, what can we do to make this person successful? Is it outside coaching, leadership coaching? Is it mentoring? What is it that will make them sort of be successful as a leader? And emphasizing, again, going back to that team mentality, really making the team work together. So I think there's so much great stuff going on there, and obviously there's more progress to be made, but I really do think that just by changing the mindset over the last, few years, that is really bringing huge benefits to our population.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Yeah, I'm sorry, Christina. I would totally agree with Anne here. I think that there is an active mindset now, and that has become part of our society as well, right? It's not just in business. It is part of our everyday living in our society. And so I think that has helped with progress. I will say that as I reflect on my career, some of the first leadership teams that I sat on as the only women, the only woman in the group, right? And now I sit on a leadership team that it's 50% women, 50% men. So I do think that we're making great progress. I do think that, some of the work that's going on within our company, we recently, over the last 2 years, established affinity groups. So we have a senior women's group, we have a emerging leader group, we have a veterans group, right? I think those are so key and important. It goes back to, having these types of groups and events help to really progress growth, enable leadership. To Anne's point, I think that's so important in developing leaders. I think the other things that we have done is we've established, 3 years ago, we established a student intern program, right? So how can we start to mentor young women who are starting their career, help them see the possibilities and the career path, and really, I think I view it now as it's part of my responsibility and duty to try to give back and to try to find those opportunities where we can help other women, as well as making sure that, you know, diversity stays front of mind in the actions that we take and in the things that we advocate.
Really good advice there, Megan. I think, and as part of today's event, I do believe we have a charity that is sponsoring development of women. So I believe our host, Emily, will get that information out for everybody to see. But I think from my perspective, right, we've seen the progression of more diversity, more inclusion. I think that's been great. It's still an evolution though. Well, there's still more that we need to do. And to your point, Megan, it's really giving back and developing others. And it's not just companies and organizations embracing it, but it's us as women also embracing that and making that, passing it back, right? So that's good. All right, our next question. So with diversity, equality, and inclusion top of mind for most companies, how are you leading efforts within your company and within your teams? How about we start, Anne, you wanna give us a thought from your side?
Sure. So the nicest thing about our membership is it's broad, and it has the biggest of the bigs in the logistic companies and the smallest of the smalls. So I would say probably 80% of our members are revenue size of 50 million and below. And so they may not have the capacity yet to start getting into, all right, what is our DEI initiative going to be? They need direction, right? And so I think it's critical for us as an association to provide what that direction is. Now, I've been here a year, so I haven't necessarily solidified what that will be, but going forward, I want us to be the resource in that, because yes, the biggest of the bigs, they're publicly traded, they've got their own direction. You know, we can obviously help be best in class or do best practices, but it's really the smallest of the smalls that are going to need guidance. And so what I want to make sure that whatever we do, that it's meaningful and it doesn't just check a box, and that it also it's productive and it's helpful. And so, you know, what does that universe look like? And so, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of like association resources, and this is the number one point of conversation amongst all my peers in associations. We will get there. I just want to make sure it's smart, that it's relevant, that it's helpful, and it's not something that's just like, oh, we did this, so get off our backs. It's actually, this is meaningful, and this will provide support for your organizations going forward.
So to keep progressing on that question, maybe Marjorie, what kind of strategies have you guys found that promote the inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a really good nuance, Christina. While we do the traditional diversity and inclusion initiatives, I think that the thing that is most helpful that I find is basically mentorship and advocacy. It is what helps. We have, for example, at PRG, we have a great chief administrative officer who happens to be a woman, and who takes it on herself to ensure that other women are heard and to promote them within the workplace in several different ways, whether it be with regards to roles or that their voice is heard, or to even to encourage them, you know, just an opportunity to encourage them to say, great job done. I think those are the ones that are helping us the most, in addition to the standard, you know, you have the normal diversity and inclusion initiatives that the company undertakes.
That's awesome. That's great that you guys have that structure, that infrastructure facilitating that to help everybody get a seat at the table. So that kind of goes to that next extrapolation on our conversation here. So maybe Megan, how do you stay mindful of who's at the table and who's missing?
Yeah, I think it goes back to having that active mindset. I think that, you know, being able to apply some judgment and say, hey, I think that we don't have the full perspective here. So, you know, at our company, we've been very open about, we talk about, let's socialize this new initiative or this new idea or this new approach, and let's actually purposefully, intentionally pull in people that would have differing perspectives. and let's just listen before we make any decisions on how we're going to proceed. And I think that has been really important to making sure that we use a well-rounded approach. And it's also been, very insightful, and I think has fostered diversity, not only just of thought and opinion, but of perspective, and really helped to shape and roll out initiatives or approaches that have been really successful.
That's really good feedback. All right, so let's move into our last question to close this out for the day. You guys have been fantastic, so thank you for all of the wonderful feedback. But before we leave, I wanted to ask, what's your advice for the next generation of female leaders, whether it's in logistics or not, but what's that one piece that you feel is important that you'd want to share with someone else?
I'll
Anne,
start.
You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I would just say this, that the less you take personally, the better. And assume the best of your colleagues, assume the best of intentions of your colleagues. If you can do that, I think that prevents a lot of heartache, because then it just becomes about the job as opposed to about you. And let's just say people don't like you because you're a woman, or let's just say people don't like you because you're African American. Let's just say whatever it is, the less that you can take that personally and then just do as good as job that you can possibly do, the better your success will be in your career. And when I say also assume the best of intentions of your colleagues, we all know this. There's the Teams chatter, and then there's email stuff where you can't tell what someone's tone is, and you're like, what why did that guy send me that email? And you just like, right? The more you can just say, well, let me understand where they're coming from, or maybe that person said it at 11 p.m. at night and their kid had been screaming at them all night. Let's just take a step back and assume the best of intentions. I think that will sort of decompress you, and then you can address the issues head on. Anyway, so that's it.
That's great. Megan or Madri?
I can go next. I think a couple of things for women especially, to keep in mind: have a seat at the table. Sometimes you need to ask for that. Don't be afraid to ask. The second I would say is keep your hand raised. Sometimes when you raise your hand, you may not be always called upon, but don't lower it until you get your turn.
I think that's awesome. Mine is going to kind of build on that. And Anne actually touched on this earlier. You are your own best advocate and promoter. So don't forget that. You find opportunities to advocate for yourself. Ask. My mom taught me it never hurts to ask. It won't put you in any worse of a position, right? And you need to be your own advocate and your own promoter. You don't have to do it in a boastful way, right? But make others aware of what you have achieved and your accomplishments and your strengths. And I think that taking that personal accountability and responsibility, don't wait for others to advocate for you or to recommend your next position. I have to tell this story because I think it really impacted the way that I have approached my career. So when I was 12 years old, my very first job was as a babysitter. And I babysat in our neighborhood, and my mom was friends with all the moms. I was kind of one of the older kids in the neighborhood, so there were tons of younger kids. And I was helping out a friend of my mom's who had 4 young kids. And she asked me, I wanted to get into babysitting and start earning some money. And she asked me, well, will you just come down and just help me? I won't leave the house. Just help me with the 4 kids. So I did that, and I did that for probably a month or so. And she paid me a very minimal wage. I can't remember. I wish I could. But my mom, one day she asked me to babysit, and I said, no, I can't babysit. And my mom asked me, well, why can't you babysit? And I said, well, I'm not going to babysit anymore. And she said, well, why? And I said, because she doesn't pay me enough. Because she started going out and running errands and leaving me with 2 of the kids. And she doesn't pay me enough. I'm doing more responsibility now. And my mom said, you need to go ask her. You need to speak up, and you need to advocate for yourself. And I can tell you, I was so nervous to go and ask her and tell her why I thought I deserved a raise. But I did it, and she gave it to me. She said, oh, I had no idea. Absolutely. Right? So that has stuck with me my entire career. And, you know, it just being your own advocate and speaking up and making others aware. Sometimes it's just that they're not aware. So I think that's, you know, that's been the greatest piece of wisdom that I got from my mom and carry with me today. And I hope you all will consider too.
That's wonderful. I think, look, you all had wonderful advice to give others. If I could chime in on my last 2 cents of wisdom for someone, I think it would be to embrace the uncomfortableness, be okay with things being awkward sometimes, right? You're not always going to be perfect or the most confident or polished. And that's part of evolution. That's part of growing as a person. And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to be something right then and right there. And it's okay if you're not, as long as you're willing to be okay with that yourself, right? And you can recognize it, that you're working towards something and that you learn over every interaction or every instance or experience, you can get better and stronger. So be okay with being uncomfortable sometimes. That was a hard one for me to learn initially. So thank you again to our group of panelists today. We really appreciate you guys joining us and giving us your thoughts and wisdom and experiences. And I'm going to give it back to Emily to wrap us up.
Thank you, ladies. That was so eye-opening. And, you know, I really appreciate you just being candid and open about your stories and sharing your perspectives on things. It's really helpful for us to hear your experiences. And I feel like we really kind of understand and feel how you guys are feeling in those experiences. So that's great. I really appreciate that. I took away 3 C's specifically, right? So commitment, collaboration, and chances. And I think it's important because all of those really work together, but the commitment piece is so key, making sure that the intentions are there and that you and your organization have that process in place to be to put that intent out there is one thing, but to actually follow through with it, right? To be committed to making changes. And kudos to Redwood for doing that, for allowing us to have these conversations and allowing us to just keep going with the situation and, you know, build the diversity and things of that nature, or to break down the barriers of diversity. So really appreciate that. Collaboration. I think that's really just, such a important point in the workplace, outside the workplace, being a team, coming together and really, you know, utilizing everyone's resources, listening and learning from your peers and other people within your organization. That's just really, I think that's the way, that's the strategy, right? The winning strategy. How do you get to where you need to be if you can't be on that level? So I love that piece. And for me, the last takeaway was the taking chances, putting yourself out there, being willing to move along in your organization, move along to a different organization, right? Or if someone offers you to transition to a different group or something you're maybe not as familiar with, take the chance, put yourself out there, you know, broaden your horizons, take the time to learn and really, you know, expand your own portfolio. I think that's really key if we're thinking about, you know, how do we elevate ourselves to the next level, right? Really building our own brand. So you guys were awesome. And I really appreciate you taking the time out in your day and speaking with the group and, you know, opening yourselves up to the audience. And we really are thankful for you guys participating in this event. Another huge thank you to the marketing team here at Redwood. You guys did all the magic behind the scenes and spent a lot of time putting all of this together, and we're very thankful for that. Last but not least, just one more reminder that we are partnering with Girls Inc. The fundraising page is open and it's, you know, more than willing for anyone to donate. So thank you guys again for joining this wonderful event, and we look forward to seeing you again next year.